The slap shattered the silence of a packed ballroom. My glasses flew, 130 guests went dead silent, and my cheek burned, but the real pain was in my chest. My new daughter-in-law had just smacked me on her wedding day because I wouldn't give her the keys to my downtown Chicago condo. "That's what you get for being so selfish," she screamed at me. She wanted my house. She wanted my life. As I crouched on the floor picking up the pieces of my broken glasses, my own son Derek just stood there, watching. He acted like I was invisible. This wasn't just a slap, it was the final move in a game of manipulation. They thought I was a vulnerable, lonely old lady. But what they didn't know was the secret my husband and I had kept for decades. What they didn't know was that the very apartment they were demanding was the least valuable thing I owned. So when I finally stood up, I didn't just walk out. I called my lawyer and gave the order that would change their perfect, fake lives forever. What happened next? And how did a 68-year-old widow become a ghost of her own family's past? The truth is a lot more brutal than a slap on a wedding day. The silence that followed was deafening. No one moved to help me as I crouched down, trembling, to pick up my broken glasses. Some guests looked away, uncomfortable. Others whispered among themselves, but no one, absolutely no one, dared to defend the poor old mother-in-law who had just been publicly humiliated. My son Derek stood motionless, his gaze fixed on the floor as if I were invisible. "You're not welcome here anymore," Olivia continued, smoothing her pristine wedding gown. "Derek and I need our privacy to start our new life. Your apartment would be perfect for us while we shop for something better." Her words were pure venom. For months, I had endured her condescending comments about my worn-out clothes, my old car, my simple life. But this had crossed a line that should never have been touched. I rose slowly, feeling all eyes on me like sharp daggers. Tears streamed down my face, but inside something had changed forever. That slap wasn't just a physical blow, it was the final straw. For years I had kept a low profile, living with humility and discretion. I had secrets no one, not even my own son, knew. Memories of the last few months began to bombard my mind as I slowly walked toward the exit. I remembered when Olivia first came to my apartment 2 years ago. Her face fell when she saw my modest home, my old furniture, my small kitchen. "Seriously, this is where Derek's mom lives?" she had asked him, her voice just loud enough for me to hear. From that moment on, every visit had been a silent torture. "Sophia, you should move to a smaller place," she had told me 3 months ago during a family dinner. "At your age, you can't maintain such a big apartment. Besides, Derek and I are thinking of having kids soon. We'll need more space." Her fake smile didn't fool anyone except my son, who seemed to lose his personality whenever she spoke, acting like a puppet on a string. The humiliations had escalated gradually. First, it was the comments about my clothes. "Sophia, don't you have anything more modern to wear?" Then, it was about my car. "That car is so old, it's dangerous for you to drive that." Next, it was my part-time job at the local flower shop. "I don't understand why a woman your age is still working instead of relaxing." Each phrase was a small poison dagger stabbing at my self-esteem. My name is Sophia Hughes. I am 68 years old, and all my life I have been a woman who prefers discretion over ostentation. I work at a small flower shop 3 days a week. I drive a 10-year-old car. I buy my clothes at discount stores. To the outside world, especially to Olivia, I am just a middle-class widow living on a fixed income. But that's exactly the image I have carefully cultivated for decades. What none of those people looking at me with pity knew was that my life had been completely different before my husband passed. My husband, George, had not been the office worker everyone believed. We had made a conscious decision to live modestly, to keep our true wealth a secret, to protect our family's privacy in a way that I now understood had been prophetic. As I walked out of the ballroom, the guests' conversations followed me like a toxic cloud. "Poor thing, she looks so fragile," whispered Olivia's aunt. "The bride is right. That woman can't take care of herself anymore," added Derek's cousin. "She should be in a retirement home, not living alone," another guest commented with false compassion. Each word was like acid pouring on open wounds. The cool temperature of the ballroom's air conditioning contrasted sharply with the suffocating heat in my chest. My hands trembled as I fumbled for my cell phone in my worn black purse. A purse I had used for 5 years, not because I couldn't afford a new one, but because I had learned to value practicality over appearances, something my daughter-in-law would clearly never understand. I dialed a number I knew by heart, a number I hadn't used in over a year because I had naively hoped it would never be necessary. Carlos, it's Sophia. I need you to come to the Royal Oaks Ballroom immediately. Yes, right now. Bring the documents you know about. It's time for them to know the truth. My voice trembled, but there was a firmness in it I hadn't felt in a long time. Are you sure, Mrs. Hughes? Carlos asked with his professional but concerned voice. Once we do this, there's no turning back. I glanced back at the ballroom one last time, where I could see Olivia laughing with her friends, likely telling them how she had put her useless mother-in-law in her place. Derek was by her side, smiling weakly, showing not a single ounce of remorse for what he had just witnessed. Completely sure, I replied. 30 minutes, Carlos. No more. I hung up the phone and walked toward my car with determined steps. For the first time in years, I was going to drop the mask I had used to protect my family. For the first time, they were going to meet the real Sophia Hughes. And when that happened, when reality hit their perfect fake worlds, they would understand the true meaning of the word regret. Do you want to know what happened next? Don't let the fear of missing out on the truth keep you from hitting that subscribe button. It's a choice between knowing the whole story or living in suspense forever. Join the family, because you wouldn't want to be left behind, would you? The parking lot was quiet, lit by street lights that cast long shadows between the cars. I sat in my old sedan and waited 30 minutes for their lives to change forever. 30 minutes for them to discover they had made the biggest mistake of their lives by humiliating the woman who had secretly been taking care of them more than they could ever imagine. While I waited in my car, memories of how I had reached this moment began to flood my mind like an unstoppable avalanche. It had all started exactly 2.5 years ago when Derek came to my apartment with that nervous smile I knew so well from when he was a boy. "Mom, I want you to meet someone very special," he had told me. And there she was, Olivia, with her perfectly styled hair, her designer clothes, and that smile that didn't reach her eyes. From the very first moment, I knew something wasn't right. The way she looked at my apartment, evaluating every corner with thinly veiled disdain, told me everything I needed to know about her intentions. "How cozy," she had murmured as she looked at my second-hand furniture and my faded curtains. Her tone suggested the opposite. Derek, completely blinded by what he believed was love, didn't notice the condescension in her voice. That first dinner had been a silent disaster. Olivia barely touched the food I had lovingly prepared, claiming she was watching her figure. When I asked her about her family, she gave evasive answers, but not before asking me about my financial situation with a curiosity that I found alarming. "And how do you manage on a widow's pension, Sophia? It must be hard to get by on so little money," she had said with fake concern. What Olivia didn't know was that I had been observing her as much as she had been observing me. Over the next few months, I began to notice patterns that put me on high alert. Every time they visited my apartment, she would make comments about how outdated everything was, about how I deserved something better in my golden years. But her eyes always lingered on the details that really mattered: the prime location of the building in a ritzy part of town, the panoramic view from my balcony, the size of the rooms. One day, while Derek was in the bathroom, I heard her speaking softly on the phone in my kitchen. "Yes, Mom. His mom's apartment is in a super expensive area. If I can get her to move to a smaller place, we could stay here until we have our own place. She's so naive she'll probably even thank us for helping her with the transition." Her words cut through me like a knife, but I maintained my composure when she returned to the living room, feigning innocence. From that moment on, every interaction with Olivia became a carefully orchestrated performance on both our parts. She played the concerned daughter-in-law, worried about her mother-in-law's well-being, while I pretended to be the vulnerable old woman who needed guidance. But inside, I was gathering information, observing her moves, understanding her true motivations. It was like a game of chess where we both thought we were winning. The following months brought a gradual escalation in her attempts at manipulation. First, there were the subtle suggestions. "Sophia, I've seen some lovely apartments for people your age with all-inclusive services and no maintenance worries." Then came the more direct pressures. You can't keep living alone at your age. It's dangerous. What if you fall and no one finds out for days? Each argument was designed to make me feel incompetent and helpless. Derek, my own son, began to echo the same phrases like a trained parrot. Mum, Olivia is right. Maybe it would be better for you to consider moving to a more manageable place. Seeing him gradually transform into that woman's puppet was more painful than any direct insult. The son I had raised with so much love and sacrifice now saw me as an obstacle to his happiness. Don't be like Derek, blinded and easily influenced. Don't let this video end without you making a choice. Subscribe right now or leave a comment telling me exactly why you're not subscribing. Are you afraid to commit? Are you scared of what your friends might think? I'm watching the comments, so don't be shy. The psychological campaign intensified after they announced their engagement. Visits became more frequent but also more tense. Olivia had started bringing real estate magazines and brochures for senior communities. I'm just exploring options for you, Sophia. I want to make sure you have the best quality of life possible, she would say, spreading the materials on my coffee table as if it were a business negotiation. But I had been doing my own research. One afternoon, when they went out to run wedding errands, I decided to call an old friend who worked in real estate. Amelia, I need you to investigate something for me, I told her. There's a couple who are very interested in my apartment, and I want to know more about their real financial situation. What I discovered chilled me to the bone. Olivia and Derek were neck deep in debt. The wedding they were planning cost more than $50,000, completely financed with credit cards and personal loans. The apartment they were renting was on the verge of eviction for non-payment. The luxury cars they drove were financed with payments they couldn't afford. Their lifestyle was a facade built on suffocating debt. Everything started to make sense. The rush to get married, the insistence that I move, the constant comments about my economic vulnerability. It wasn't love that had united this couple. It was the desperate need to find a solution to their financial problems. And my apartment, located in a primo part of the city, was their lifeline. The revelation hit me like a slap to the soul. My son, the boy I had raised with values of honesty and hard work, had chosen the easy path of manipulation and deceit. He had allowed an ambitious woman to convince him to see his own mother as a resource to be exploited instead of a person to be loved and respected. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, their attempts became more aggressive. Sophia, you can't keep being so selfish, Olivia had said to me just 3 days before the ceremony. Derek and I have sacrificed so much for this marriage. The least you can do is help us with housing. Her words no longer even wore the mask of fake concern. It was a direct demand disguised as a family favor. That night, I had made a decision that would change everything. I called Carlos, my financial advisor, and the only man I had completely trusted since my husband George's death. Carlos, I need you to prepare some documents. It's possible I'll very soon have to reveal information I've kept secret for years. His voice had become serious immediately. Mrs. Hughes, are you sure this is the right time? He had warned me with the wisdom of someone who had handled my affairs for more than a decade. Once this information is public, you can't take it back. The consequences could be devastating for family relationships. But I had already made up my mind. The family I had tried to protect with my silence had chosen to betray me. And now, sitting in my car in the ballroom parking lot, waiting for Carlos to arrive with the documents that would change everything, I realized the moment of truth had come. 25 more minutes, and Olivia, Derek, and all those guests who had looked at me with pity would discover who Sophia Hughes really was. 25 more minutes, and their perfect worlds built on lies and greed would crumble like sand castles. The night breeze rustled the tree leaves around the parking lot, creating dancing shadows under the lights. It was strangely poetic that on such a beautiful night, so many illusions were about to die forever. 20 minutes had passed since my call to Carlos, and every second felt like an eternity. From my car, I could see the golden lights of the ballroom, hear the cheerful music and laughter spilling out of the open windows. It was surreal to think that in just a few minutes, that celebration would turn into a nightmare for the main players. I closed my eyes and let the most painful memories of the last few months flood my mind. I needed to remember exactly why I had reached this point of no return. The biggest humiliation had happened just 2 weeks before the wedding, during what Olivia had called an important family meeting. She had arrived at my apartment, accompanied not only by Derek, but also by her parents, a perfectly planned ambush. "Sophia, we want to talk to you about your future." Olivia's mother, a haughty woman who looked at me as if I were a bothersome insect, had begun. "We believe it's time for you to make responsible decisions about your life," continued Olivia's father, a burly man who had surveyed my apartment with the eyes of an appraiser evaluating a property. "At your age, living alone in such a big place is not only unnecessary but dangerous. What if you have a medical emergency and no one finds out for days?" Their words were rehearsed, too perfect to be spontaneous. Derek had remained silent throughout the conversation, nodding occasionally like a well-trained puppet. Seeing him there, sitting next to a family that treated me like an obstacle, was like watching the son I had raised die before my eyes. "Mom," he finally said in a voice I no longer recognized. "They're right. Olivia and I have been talking, and we think it would be better for everyone if you moved to a place more appropriate for your age." "Appropriate for my age," I repeated, feeling the anger begin to boil inside me. "And who gets to decide what's appropriate for me? You." Olivia's mother exchanged a knowing look with her husband, as if my words confirmed something they had already discussed. "Sophia, we understand this can be difficult to accept, but you must think about what's best for Derek and Olivia." "What's best for them?" I murmured, beginning to understand the true dimension of the conspiracy that had been woven behind my back. "And I suppose my apartment would be perfect for them to start their married life, right?" The awkward silence that followed my question was all the answer I needed. They had planned every detail of this conversation, every argument, every psychological pressure. Olivia took control at that moment, deploying her full arsenal of emotional manipulation. "Sophia, it's not just about the apartment. It's about your well-being. We've been doing research, and we found a wonderful residence for people your age. It has 24-hour medical services, social activities, prepared meals. You could make friends with people who understand what you're going through." Her fake smile made me nauseous. "What I'm going through?" I asked, feigning confusion. "And what exactly do you think I'm going through, Olivia?" She looked at Derek for support before answering. "Well, loneliness, financial uncertainty, the fear of not being able to take care of yourself. It's normal at your age, Sophia. You don't have to be ashamed of needing help." The audacity of this 28-year-old woman telling me what was normal at my age left me speechless for a moment. But then I saw something in her eyes that chilled me. The absolute certainty that she had a right to my life, my home, my decisions. To her, I was no longer a person with autonomy, but an obstacle to be removed with as little resistance as possible. "We've run the numbers," Olivia's father continued, pulling out a folder they had clearly prepared in advance. "The cost of the residence would be approximately $2,500 a month. With the sale of your apartment, you'd have enough money to cover it for many years, and there would still be some left over to help Derek and Olivia with their initial marriage expenses." There it was, the naked, raw truth. It wasn't about my well-being or my safety. It was about money. It was about converting my home into cash to finance their unsustainable lifestyle. "And if I refuse?" I asked, although I already knew the answer. "Sophia," Derek said, his voice sounding rehearsed, "we hope it won't be necessary to take more drastic measures, but if your mental health deteriorates to the point that you can't make rational decisions..." The implicit threat was crystal clear. If I didn't cooperate voluntarily, they would seek legal ways to declare me incompetent. They had done their research. They had planned. They had prepared the ground to take everything I owned by force if necessary. The son I had raised with so much love was sitting right there, allowing strangers to threaten his own mother. That night, after they left with my firm refusal, I cried for the first time in years, not out of sadness, but for the definitive death of the illusions I had held about my family. I had called Carlos immediately. "I need you to investigate something urgently," I had told him through tears. "I want to know exactly what the real financial situation is for my son and his fiancée. Everything. Debts, income, liabilities, everything." The results of that investigation had been devastating. Derek earned $45,000 annually as a sales manager but had debts of more than $80,000 on credit cards. Olivia worked part-time as an image consultant, making maybe $4,000 a year, but spent as if she had an executive salary. Together they owed more than $120,000, not counting the loans they had taken out for the wedding. The apartment they rented for $2,000 a month was 3 months behind on payments. The cars they drove were financed with payments that took up 60% of their combined income. Their main credit card was maxed out, and they had started using cash advances to pay other debts. They were in a financial freefall, and my apartment represented their only hope of salvation. But there was something else in Carlos's report that had completely broken my heart. For the past 6 months, Derek had been regularly calling banks and insurance companies asking about loans against his elderly mother's property. He had been asking about legal procedures to obtain financial power of attorney over senior citizens. My own son had been planning my systematic dispossession for months. The most painful information had come at the end of the report. According to a private investigator Carlos had hired, Olivia had been telling her friends that she had sacrificed herself by getting engaged to an older, less attractive man because his mother had valuable properties and no competitive heirs. To her, marrying Derek wasn't love. It was a strategic investment in my estate. That revelation had been the final straw. For weeks, I had considered simply revealing my true financial situation to them, thinking that maybe the shock would make them reconsider their behavior. But after reading that report, I understood that it wasn't about money or desperation. It was about a pure, calculated greed that had corrupted my son until he was unrecognizable. The days leading up to the wedding had been torture. Every phone call from Derek was a new pressure to reconsider my position. Every visit from Olivia included poisonous comments about my stubbornness and selfishness. They had started to treat me as if I were already a senile old woman whose opinions didn't matter. The night before the wedding, Derek had made his last attempt. "Mom, tomorrow is the most important day of my life. Please don't ruin it by being difficult. Olivia just wants what's best for all of us." His words had been the final confirmation that I had lost my son forever. The man who was getting married the next day was no longer the boy I had raised with so much love and sacrifice. And now, sitting in my car waiting for Carlos, I realized that everything had led to this inevitable moment. It wasn't about revenge or cruelty. It was about justice. It was about showing them the consequences of their actions. It was about teaching them that some lines should never have been crossed. 15 more minutes and everything would change forever. My hands trembled as I dialed the number for Joseph, my neighbor from the apartment next door, a 70-year-old man who had been a silent witness to all the tense visits of the last few months. "Joseph, it's Sophia. I need to ask you for a very important favor," I said, my voice shaking. "Could you go to my apartment and bring me the brown folder from the second drawer of my desk? Yes, right now. It's urgent." Joseph had been like a brother to me since George passed away, and I knew I could trust him without him asking questions. While I waited, I remembered the conversation I had with Joseph just a week earlier. He had witnessed from his balcony when Olivia arrived with a real estate appraiser without notifying me. "Sophia, that girl brought a man with a briefcase who was measuring your apartment from the outside," he had told me with obvious concern in his voice. "When they saw me, they left quickly. I don't like what's happening at all." Joseph had been the first to notice the subtle changes in Derek's behavior over the last few months. "Your son doesn't greet me like he used to," he had observed. "He used to stay and chat with me when he came to visit. Now he rushes in and out as if he's ashamed of something." His words had confirmed what my heart already knew. I had lost my son long before the slap that night. The folder I had asked Joseph for contained documents no one in my family had ever seen. Bank certificates, property titles, investment records that George and I had kept secret for decades. Documents that proved the poor widow living on a modest pension was actually a woman with enough resources to change lives with a single decision. 10 minutes later, Joseph appeared in the parking lot with the folder in his hands. "Sophia, what's going on? You look very upset," he asked as he handed me the documents. "It has to do with Derek's wedding," I explained briefly what had happened in the ballroom, and I saw his face harden with every detail. "That woman is a viper," he muttered. "I always knew it." Joseph, in a few minutes a man named Carlos will arrive. When you see him, tell him I'm waiting for him here, I asked. And Joseph, after tonight, many things are going to change. I want you to know you have always been like family to me. His eyes filled with tears as he nodded. You're family to me too, Sophia. Do what you have to do. As Joseph returned to the building, I opened the folder and began to review documents I hadn't looked at in months. The first was a bank statement showing a balance of $5,400,000 in an investment account. The second was the property title for a downtown office building that generated monthly rent of $50,000. The third was the deed to a beach house in Malibu I had bought as an investment 10 years ago. George had been a genius at investments, starting with a small import business and turning it into a silent empire. Together we had made the decision to live modestly, to protect our privacy and our family security. Visible wealth attracts problems. Invisible wealth gives you power, George used to say. I never imagined I would have to use that power against my own son. Each document in that folder represented years of hard work and smart decisions. The flower shop where I worked 3 days a week wasn't because I needed the money, but because I liked to stay active and connected to the community. The old car I drove wasn't due to economic limitations, but because I had learned that unnecessary ostentation only brings problems. My apartment, the one Olivia so coveted, was actually the least valuable property in my portfolio. I had bought it not for its economic value, but for the memories it held. It was where George and I had spent our last years together, where we had planned our future, where he had passed away in my arms after a brave battle with cancer. But there was something else in that folder that would change everything for Derek and Olivia. For the last 3 years, since my son had started having financial problems, I had been secretly paying many of his debts. The credit card payments he thought came from a work bonus were actually coming out of my account. The special discount on his rent that he had negotiated with his landlord was money I transferred monthly. Without Derek knowing, I had been subsidizing his irresponsible lifestyle for years. The luxurious apartment he lived in, the car he drove, even some of the expenses for the wedding that was taking place at that very moment had been made possible by my secret financial support. I had thought I was helping my son through a difficult time, not realizing I was financing his transformation into a person I didn't recognize. The bank records showed monthly transfers totaling $4,500 that had kept the sinking ship of Derek's financial life afloat. Money he thought came from work bonuses or tax refunds, when in reality it was his mother desperately trying to protect him from the consequences of his irresponsible decisions. The irony was devastating. While Olivia was humiliating me for being an economic burden on their future marriage, I was literally the only reason they could afford that marriage. While they were planning to strip me of my apartment to solve their financial problems, I had been solving those problems in secret for years. I closed the folder and looked toward the ballroom once more. The lights were still shining, the music was still playing, the guests were still celebrating, but in less than 5 minutes Carlos would arrive with the final documents I needed. In less than 5 minutes, the process of cutting all the financial threads I had used to protect a son who had chosen to betray me would begin. This is not a fight back, I reminded myself. This is justice. This is about teaching them that actions have consequences, that greed has a price, that family is not something you can sell for economic convenience. I had tried to protect Derek from reality for too long, and that protection had corrupted him until he was unrecognizable. Headlights of a car approached the parking lot, illuminating the night with a white light that momentarily blinded me. It was Carlos, punctual as always, arriving with the documents that would change everything forever. I got out of my car and walked toward him, feeling how each step took me further away from the Sophia I had been, and closer to the woman I needed to become. "Mrs. Hughes," Carlos said, as he got out of his car, a legal brief under his arm. "Are you completely sure about this? Once we go in there, there will be no way to undo what is about to happen." I looked toward the ballroom one last time, where my son and his new wife were probably still celebrating their victory over the useless old woman they had just humiliated. I have never been more sure of something in my life, Carlos. It's time for them to meet the real Sophia Hughes. Carlos opened his folder under the parking lot light and began to show me the documents he had prepared with his characteristic efficiency. Mrs. Hughes, here is the order for the immediate suspension of all bank transfers you have been making in Derek Hughes's name, he said, pointing to the first paper. Also, here is the notice of cancellation of the lease agreement that you had confidentially guaranteed. The landlord will receive this document tomorrow morning. I took the papers with trembling but determined hands. Each document represented a thread that I had carefully woven for years to protect my son, and now I was cutting those threads one by one. And the payment for the ballroom, I asked, although I already knew the answer. Cancelled, Carlos confirmed. The deposit you had guaranteed will be withdrawn tonight. They will have until tomorrow to find an alternative form of payment. The magnitude of what I was about to do hit me like a cold wave. For 3 years, I had been the invisible safety net that had kept Derek and Olivia's lives afloat. The apartment they lived in, the car he drove, even the wedding that was taking place at that very moment had all been made possible by my secret financial support. And now, in a single night, I was going to withdraw all that support definitively. Carlos, I want you to understand something, I said to him as I signed each document with a determination I hadn't felt in years. This is not cruelty or revenge. This is the only way for them to learn the real value of things. For too long, I protected them from the consequences of their actions, and that protection corrupted them into people I don't recognize. I understand perfectly, Mrs. Hughes, Carlos replied, with genuine respect in his voice. In my 30 years as a financial advisor, I have seen many families destroyed by greed and ingratitude. What you are doing requires more courage than most people possess. His words gave me the final strength I needed to take the last step. We walked together toward the ballroom entrance, and with each step I could feel my heart beating faster. It wasn't nervousness I felt. It was a strange mix of sadness for what I had lost and anticipation for what I was about to regain. My dignity, my self-respect, my right to be treated as a human being instead of as a resource to be exploited. The music stopped abruptly when we entered the ballroom. 130 pairs of eyes turned toward us, and I could see the confusion on the guests' faces. Some recognized Carlos immediately. After all, he had handled the financial affairs of several prominent families in the city for decades. His presence at social events usually meant that something important was about to happen. Olivia was the first to react. "What are you doing here, Sophia?" she shouted at me from the center of the dance floor, where she had been posing for photos with Derek. "You already left once. Wasn't that enough drama for one night?" Her voice carried that arrogance I had come to know so well, but I could detect a note of nervousness that hadn't been there before. "Ladies and gentlemen," Carlos said in a clear, professional voice, "I apologize for interrupting this celebration, but I have urgent legal matters to discuss with Mr. Derek Hughes and Mrs. Olivia Dawson." The silence that followed was so deep you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Some guests began to pull out their cell phones, sensing they were about to witness something extraordinary. Derek slowly approached, his face pale and his eyes full of confusion. "What's going on here, Mom?" he asked me, in a voice that no longer sounded as confident as it had when he had humiliated me just minutes before. "Who is this man, and why is he talking about legal matters?" I could see his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted his tie, a nervous gesture he had had since childhood. "Derek," I said in a voice firmer than it had sounded in months, "this is Carlos Jones, my financial and legal advisor. He has come to deliver some documents that I think you will find very enlightening." Carlos opened his folder and took out the first document. "Mr. Derek Hughes, you are hereby notified that the financial guarantee your mother had provided for your lease agreement has been immediately cancelled. Your landlord will be notified tomorrow morning, and you will have 30 days to find a new guarantor or vacate the property." All the colour drained from Derek's face. "Financial guarantee," he murmured, looking at me with eyes that were beginning to fill with comprehension and horror. "Mom, what is he talking about?" But I could see from his expression that a part of him already knew. For years, he had suspected that his financial luck wasn't completely natural, but he had chosen not to ask questions because the answers might have been uncomfortable. "Also," Carlos continued relentlessly, The monthly transfers of $4,500 that your mother had been making to your personal accounts have been permanently suspended. This includes payments for credit cards, car insurance, and various other expenses that you believed were being covered by other sources. Olivia let out a gasp that echoed throughout the ballroom. "That's impossible," she exclaimed, running toward us, her wedding dress dragging on the floor. "Derek doesn't have a rich mother. Look how she lives. Look at her clothes, her car. She's an old woman living on a miserable pension." Her hysteria was evident, and several guests began to murmur among themselves with increasing fascination. "Finally," Carlo said, taking the last document from his folder, "the guaranteed payment for this celebration has also been cancelled. The ballroom management will have the right to demand full payment before guests can leave tonight." His words fell on the ballroom like a bomb, and I could see some guests nervously begin to move toward the exits. The realization hit Derek like a hammer. "You," he muttered, looking at me with eyes that couldn't fully process what they were hearing. "You've been all this time. You've been paying for everything." His voice broke on the last word, and for a moment I saw the small boy he had once been, vulnerable and confused. "For 3 years, Derek," I confirmed in a voice that sounded strangely calm after the emotional storm I had been living through. 3 years in which I thought I was helping you get through a difficult time. 3 years in which I believed you would eventually recover and become the man I raised. 3 years in which I hoped you would remember the values I taught you. Olivia began to pace in circles, clutching her head with increasing desperation. "This can't be happening. This can't be real," she screamed as the guests watched her with a mix of horror and morbid fascination. "You're a poor old woman. You work at a flower shop. You drive a 10-year-old car. You can't have money." "Appearances are deceiving, Olivia," I said finally, feeling decades of careful performance come to an end. "For years." The story of Sophia and Derek is a powerful reminder that sometimes the family we choose is the one that truly matters. I hope this story helped you realize that the end of a toxic relationship isn't a loss, it's a liberation. Remember, it's never too late to write a new chapter in your own story. The end is near, and so is the opportunity for you to make a choice. Don't be the person who watches the story end and wonders what they could have done. Subscribe now to join a community that values truth and justice. Don't be afraid, we are all here for you. Join now or leave a comment explaining your fears.